Good afternoon. I'm Alvin Bragg, Manhattan District Attorney. I'm honored and privileged to be joined by Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch. First and foremost, I want to extend my deepest condolences to Mr. Thompson's loved ones and colleagues. His family deserves our respect as they continue to grieve. Our work will never be able to undo the fact that a life was lost. We are here to announce that Luigi Mangione, the defendant, is charged with 1 count of murder in the first degree and 2 counts of murder in the second degree, including 1 count of murder in the second degree as an act of terrorism for the brazen, targeted, and premeditated shooting of Brian Thompson, who, as you know, was the CEO of UnitedHealthcare. This case was made possible by the collaborative efforts of the phenomenal public servants you see before you today, and so many others who are not here. I'm honored to lead the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and privileged to serve alongside Assistant District Attorneys Joel Seidman, Kristen Bailey, and Zachary Kaplan, who were working from the outset, hand in hand, with the greatest police department in the world. The chief of our trial division, Lisa Del Pizzo, and the deputy chief, Chris Prevost, provided sage oversight and direction. And I want to acknowledge our high technology analysis unit. There was a lot to be processed here. Steve Moran, in particular, who heads that, and Marco Popic. We are privileged here at the DA's office to work every day with the phenomenal public servants at the NYPD. It has been a distinct pleasure to work besides Commissioner Tisch, an exemplary partner, and Chief of Detectives Joseph Kinney. Almost every day we're in touch, and his leadership is second to none. And then Deputy Commissioner Rebecca Weiner, who, as I tell her, there are a lot of challenging things happening in the world, and I sleep better at night knowing that she is the Deputy Commissioner in charge of terrorism. The detectives on this, out doing the courageous frontline work, Detective Oscar Diaz, Detective Curcio, exemplary, the finest. It wasn't just those of us here in New York. I want to acknowledge the great work of our partners in Altoona, the Altoona Police Department, the Blair County District Attorney's Office, the governors of New York and Pennsylvania, the FBI, and of course, the brave members of the public who answered the call when our great commissioner put out the call for their assistance. This was a frightening, well-planned, targeted murder that was intended to cause shock and attention and intimidation. It occurred in one of the most bustling parts of our city, threatening the safety of local residents and tourists alike, commuters and business people just starting out on their day. Let me say a bit more about the charges. They include 1 count of murder in the first degree as a killing in furtherance of terrorism, 2 counts of murder in the second degree, 1 charging that the killing was done as an act of terrorism, and the second pertaining to the fact that the killing was intentional. The maximum penalty possible for murder in the first degree and murder in the second degree as an act of terrorism is life without parole. The maximum penalty for murder in the second degree is 25 years to life. There are additional counts as well. A number of criminal possession of weapon charges, 2 counts in the second degree, 4 counts in the third degree, 1 count in the fourth degree, and a count of criminal possession of a forged instrument in the second degree. Let me tell you a bit about the facts. On November 24th, we allege that the defendant arrived in New York City to murder Brian Thompson. After the defendant arrived in New York City on a bus at Port Authority, he checked into the hostel on the Upper West Side using the name Mark Rosario with a fake New Jersey ID. On the morning of December 4th, the defendant left the hostel, just after 5:30 a.m. and traveled to Midtown. For nearly an hour, we allege the defendant waited in the area near the Hilton Hotel, waiting for Mr. Thompson to appear. From 6:38 a.m. to 6:44 a.m., the defendant stood across from the entrance of the hotel on West 54th Street. When he saw Mr. Thompson, he crossed the street and approached him from behind. We allege he then took out a 9mm 3D printed ghost gun, equipped with a 3D printed suppressor, and shot him once in the back and once in the leg. The defendant then fled northeast on 54th Street and took an e-bike uptown before getting into a taxi that took him to West 178th Street and Amsterdam Avenue. On December 9th, the defendant was spotted at a McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. The local police were notified, he was arrested, and he was found with a 9mm handgun, a suppressor, 2 ammunition magazines, and the same fake New Jersey ID he used at the hostel. I want to say a word about ghost guns. These weapons are increasingly proliferating throughout New York City and the entire country. Involving technology will only make this problem worse. Last year, over 80 ghost guns and ghost gun parts were recovered in Manhattan alone. The NYPD and the Manhattan DA's office have been leading in the
highest charges being charged with murder in the first degree, 2 counts of murder in the second degree, one of which includes terrorism. We are going to hit the pause button. We need to squeeze in a break. When we come back, we're going to get you back in for more from the district attorney.
UnitedHealthcare CEO Brian Thompson was gunned down.
Police have arrested Luigi Mangione.
Court TV and Scripps News take you inside the investigation that's captured the nation's attention.
We do not kill people in cold blood.
The motive.
One line reads, these parasites had it coming.
The manhunt.
It feels good to get a guy like that off the street.
And what's next for the accused assassin?
Assassination of a CEO. A Court TV and Scripps News special report. Wednesday at 7 on Court TV.
Today. Get you back to New York, where we are listening to a press conference held by the District Attorney of Manhattan, Alvin Bragg, regarding charges against Luigi Mangione in the alleged murder of healthcare CEO Brian Thompson.
Addiction of these ghost guns, and one thing I want to make clear, they're unserialized, they can be printed out, but as this case tragically makes clear, they are just as deadly as traditional firearms. This will remain a priority for us here in Manhattan. Finally, I know there have been questions about the extradition process. The latest that I can offer you is that the defendant is currently scheduled to appear in court in Pennsylvania on Thursday morning, first for a preliminary hearing on his Pennsylvania charges. Immediately to follow that will be an extradition hearing. We have indications that the defendant may waive that hearing, in which case he'd be brought to New York forthwith. In any event, we have been preparing on parallel paths, and before the hearing, we'll send to the governor of the state of New York the paperwork that would be necessary if he does not waive during that hearing. I now want to turn over to our great commissioner, and when I do so, I wanted to thank her for her partnership, not only on this matter, but on all we do every day together. Thank you.
All right, the DA being heard there, criminal defense attorney Sam Bassett still with me. Sam, tell me your reaction as you hear the charges. We know murder in the first degree, 2 counts of murder in the second degree, including terrorism, and then additional multiple counts, including multiple counts of possession of a criminal weapon.
I think every possible charge that could have been made has been made, and the indictment is an important stage because a grand jury considered at least the evidence, some of the evidence, and returned these indictments fairly quickly. So it's moving along fairly quickly. The charges are serious. Obviously, life without parole is the ultimate outcome if he's convicted of the highest murder charge.
And it is moving along fairly quickly. It leads me to this question. The extradition, you can't do that without charges in New York, right? So that may be part of the reason they've had to speed it along, or not at all?
Correct. I think the indictment actually buttresses the charge, the official charges in the credibility of those charges in the extradition process. And the only other remaining issue is identity, and that's a given in this case.
Is this a case that is, I don't know how to ask the question correct. It's a capital case, right? We know that. But how does one determine whether or not death penalty is appropriate or not for this kind of case?
Well, I understand that New York does not have the death penalty, and the highest punishment for a criminal case in New York is life without parole. So I don't think the death penalty is on the table.
It is not. You are correct, but that leads me to my next question, because some people talk about this. A lot of states, it would be a death penalty case. Life without parole. If convicted of the highest charge, there's a good chance the sentence would be life without parole. What does that look like for a criminal defendant? Does that mean he could end his days if there's a conviction? We know he's presumed innocent. If there's a conviction and if that's the sentence, does it mean that the reality is he may be in jail for every day of the rest of his life?
I think it is, unless a governor or an executive branch grants some sort of commutation or clemency later on due to, if somebody's very elderly and in failing health, sometimes a commutation will be granted so they can die not in prison. But I think the likelihood, if he's convicted, is that he will die in prison.
And the terrorism, so the 2 counts of murder in the second degree, DA Bragg made clear one of those is based on terrorism, active terrorism. Does that surprise you at all? Given, you know, sometimes I think people think of terrorism, there's a threat against everyone. But he did say when he came into the city and started doing this, there were bystanders everywhere. Are you surprised by the terrorism count?
A little bit, but I'm not as familiar with that statute as some might be. But I think obviously the killing being part of a greater plan, sending a greater message, and obviously the fact that it's done in Midtown Manhattan is particularly dangerous. Not just obviously the person that shot Mr. Thompson, but bystanders, and the terrorism charge addresses that reality that in today's world we have people setting out to kill people sometimes for a work view of a greater cause that they're advancing.
Right. So let me ask you this. As a criminal defense attorney, he has a very reputable criminal defense attorney. How much work does it take at the front end for a case of this magnitude as an attorney representing someone accused of murder?
It is a lot of work. You're getting a lot of input from a lot of sources. You have to build a team. One lawyer can't do this case. I imagine this attorney representing him has a lot of experience, and she was a prosecutor for a long time. So the court will give her some leeway in putting her team together and putting the case together for the defense and evaluating the evidence as it comes in.
Right, yeah, it is a lot of work. And for the investigators, even if they announce the charges, that doesn't mean that they do not have a lot of work in front of them, because it's an ongoing investigation that is in no means shored up at this point in time.